NACDEP Wednesday webinars. Thank you, Nicole, for starting that. And we have Russ Garner, who is going to be taking us away here in just a minute, who I met. He's with the Southern Rural Development Center, and I met you, I believe, 2 years ago. Is that correct? And we had
something like that, yeah.
Lovely, long conversation when I was a new faculty member at the University of Kentucky in Community Leadership Development, and trying to figure out what the Southern Rural Development Center does. And I had a nice long conversation with Russ, who is so warm and welcoming and didn't mind backing way up to share with me what I could expect or understand in terms of the role that the center plays in supporting us in the whole region. So we're really grateful to have Russ here today to share an assessment, approach to assessment that they have used, particularly with respect to the community capitals framework to understand community needs in ag and food systems. So this is a wonderful opportunity for me to pass off to Russ and for us to learn together. This is meant to be interactive, so please keep the chat going. And if you guys have questions or thoughts or ideas or other resources you can throw in there for those of us who are interested in this topic, that would be amazing. And then Russ, I know you also may pass off to some of your some of your collaborators at certain moments in time. So this will be a collective conversation, and we thank you so much.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And can you guys see that? Okay.
Yep.
Good deal. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Russ Garner. I'm an Extension Research Associate at the Southern Rural Development Center, located on the campus of Mississippi State University. I want to start this introduction with a quote from my dad. My dad passed away several years ago, but he was a farmer, as I am as well. And he said, "You may need a lawyer once or twice in your lifetime, and you may need a doctor once or twice a year, but you need a farmer every day." And I want to kind of set the tone with that, and just to kind of say that highlights the importance of agriculture, agriculture to our country and to the rest of the world. And just kind of an overview of what we're going to do. We're going to have the survey, and we're going to talk about the survey and listening sessions. We're going to talk a little bit about the regional rural development centers, of which the Southern Rural Development Center is just one of 4. A little bit about methodology, and then we're going to connect that to the community capitals, talk about a little bit about results, and then this is where you come in for discussion and next steps to kind of look, here's some, we talk about this being a listening session. It hadn't passed. We are still listening. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say. But in the wake of the pandemic, the rural development centers were tasked with NIFA to identify where stakeholders engaged in rural development see the greatest need and the greatest opportunity. And so we, as a group, the centers collected feedback through the listening sessions initiative. And just a little bit about the rural development centers. Of course, I mentioned the Southern Center located on the campus of Mississippi State University. There's one that serves the Northeast in the at Penn State University. There's one that serves the north central part of the nation, located at Purdue. And then the West is represented by the Western Center, located on the campus of Utah State. And so if I remember correctly, I think everybody is represented here on this call with their center, though. So we, as a group of as centers, we act as a conduit to the land grants in our respective regions. And there's some issues that we are specialized in. As for example, the West may discuss land usage issues, or the South deals with heirs property. But we do come together as a group on national issues, and we work very well together. And this is one of those examples of a time where we've worked well together. We've come up with a plan, and we're presenting this to you. So we were established under the Rural Development Act of 1972. Our core funding comes from NIFA, which is if you are around us at the centers a lot, and a lot of y'all are extension, we throw a lot of acronyms around, so feel free to ask me what something means. But NIFA is National Institute for Food and Agriculture. And of course, we got to give the acknowledgement. We couldn't have done this without the Extension Foundation, as well as USDA NIFA. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we do appreciate their contribution to this. We couldn't have done it without them. And of course, and I'm going to get my group of people out of the way. These are folks representing all of the rural development centers who had a part in the survey and the listening sessions. A great group of people to work. We kind of look at each other as a family, so it's not like we are four separate regional centers, but we also act as one as well. Just kind of touch a little bit on the data collection method. It was a two-phased approach. In phase one, in fall of 2021, an online survey was distributed to stakeholders, and they focused on 8 topical areas that often impact rural recovery. And the survey findings, they helped inform the development of the second phase, which was the listening sessions. And we did the listening sessions in spring of 2022. We had 8 of the sessions focused on identifying what is needed to fill the gaps between rural communities, assets, and opportunities. And these were facilitated dialogues, included interactive technologies. We asked participants to think about extension, education, research, and other investments in their particular region or their particular field that they were interested in. And then we asked them to prioritize them by the most pressing areas for intervention. And these are the topic areas explored. Physical infrastructure and public services. It's kind of funny today in thinking about physical infrastructure. I found out earlier today that I don't have water. And so we think about those basic things such as water or sewer systems, that sort of thing. You really don't think about it until you're missing it. So that brought to mind, the importance of all of these issues here to rural America. Of course, economic development, health, workforce development, community vibrancy, ag and food systems, climate change, and then diversity, equity, and inclusion. The survey methods, it was a web-based survey in fall of 2021. The question types were set response and open-ended questions. It was targeted to rural development stakeholders, and a lot of the respondents were represented land grant universities, governments, nonprofits, private interests, and others. And as you can see from the map off to your right, it shows the percentage of respondents from each particular region. And we had quite a pretty good bit of responses, 680. The participants grouped based on the national or regional areas of work. For example, if there was someone or an organization that spanned 3 regions, such as the Appalachian Regional Commission, that would have been focused on a national scope. Or you could think about a nonprofit that covers the nation. They would be under the national scope portion of it. But we had pretty good overview of folks throughout the region. Listening session methods. We did this in the spring of 22, and like I said, it kind of the survey informed the listening session methods. We had professionally facilitated discussions. We had a small group with a larger group feedback. We were able to utilize Jamboard. I don't know how many of y'all use Jamboard. I actually used it this morning. I'm starting to get addicted to using Jamboard. It's a very great tool to use. We had national listening sessions on the 4 themes: broadband and the digital divide, rural innovation and entrepreneurship, workforce development, training, and educational listening session, and then the community planning, leadership, and governments. And then we did 4 regional listening sessions on 4 regional priorities. And so this is how the priority ranks. And you can, for your respective region, you can kind of see where they landed. I'm gonna, kind of let you see how it pans out. But, we came up with the total for the average, I guess. Physical infrastructure and public services came in number 1. We had economic development came in 2. Workforce development, training, and education came in 3, and health came in 4. But this discussion is on ag and food systems. So where did that come in? So as you can see, it came in 6, which that doesn't mean it's not as important, but that just kind of shows you where it landed among the priority ranks. And among those who ranked ag and food systems as one of their top priorities, health, economic development, workforce development, training and education, and physical infrastructure and public services. All these you can argue that relate to ag and food systems some way or another. Now, here we get to the community capitals, and we explore the intersections. And then we looked at the assets, challenges, and opportunities that intersected across these priority areas. Many of the recommendations could be applied to address ag and food system issues. Of course, we talk about increasing digital literacy. You'll see from some later slides, broadband slice a lot throughout the survey and the listening session. So it's a big issue in rural America. Ag and food system entrepreneurship, training, internships, micro-credentialing for ag and food related work. Leadership development, we felt that's very important too around ag and food system issues. And then ensuring access to nutritious food to support health. And you're going to come across a quote later that mentions resiliency. And I think, resilient ag and food systems require a resilient community. So we got to, have those communities strong. Using the community capitals framework, it helps explain how interventions that build foundational capacities, such as infrastructure, social networks, and scientific knowledge, those are likely to address several topical areas at once. Okay, and just kind of looking across the importance of that some of the respondents felt. For example, assets, if you look across to human and natural, they felt that those were very important attributes as an asset. And then followed closely by built and social. And then you go and look at challenges. Well, some folks thought that the built capital is a challenge at 56.4, as well as financial and human as well. And then you look at the opportunities, and you see they felt that human capital was viewed as an opportunity as well. And so we had 109 folks actually chose ag and food systems as a priority. So that's how many actually were looking at this portion of it. And just kind of breaking it down, what I did is I took the table from the last slide, and then I went out and looked at some of the key words that popped up under assets, and built. One of them was a variety of farms. I think meals and other processing showed up as well. Cultural, You think about agritourism, farmers markets, that sort of thing. Financial, family income was important, was mentioned quite a bit. Human, which actually scored high. Folks were proud of their people in their communities that had expertise and knowledge of farming, and they were really felt good about the land and water and other natural resources that are available. They several had good things to say about USDA being a good partner there in the community. Extension was mentioned quite a bit. Other agribusiness business councils, that sort of thing. And then social, connecting generations, passing on, farm zone. And then the strong community connections were viewed as value too. And here's some of the quotes, talking about going back to land as a resource. Land is available to produce foods for our reservation. I'm not going to read all these. They were, talking about how USDA and NRCS and extension offices, they were good resources. But this is where, it tells the stories when you're hearing, straight from folks that are on the ground and are dealing with the issues in their communities. And then we looked at the challenges. There again, we see broadband a lot as being a challenge. It was viewed as an asset, but it's also a challenge too. And some, I'll take my community, for example. We've just gotten in some really good broadband. And so I've actually got younger folks that are moving back home and being able to work from home. So, there it's an asset, but in another community, it could be seen as a challenge. Another thing we look at is a cultural, young people disregarding agriculture careers. So there's a push to get more young folks involved in viewing farming as a viable option. And then another challenge, lack of access to capital under the financial capital. Human, lack of skilled workforce, population decline, natural, affordable land, and then political, inadequate farm programs, political polarization. We see that every day. And then under the social, I really didn't come across any wording that said anything about social, but the one question I have for y'all to think about is could population decline be a social capital challenge or a human capital challenge or both? So that's something we need to, think about. Some of the quotes here, bridging the gap on communication. There again, we're talking about, broadband, digital inclusion, that sort of thing. Some communities, some have folks that are really working to get broadband in their communities, some not so much. Of course, rural areas, someone mentions the competition from opportunities in urban areas. It's hard to compete from an urban area that has amenities that appeal to younger folks. So how do we accentuate the positives in your community? And then we look at the opportunities. Once again, opportunity could be broadband under the built. If you don't have, like my community, we do not have a really good local farmers market, but how do we get the expertise and the knowledge to build that? Financial, what could you do if you're in a county like mine that number one corn county in the state, but yeah, you don't have a processing facility. Well, what do you need to do to facilitate that? Human, look at the education and training, what are the possibilities for that? And then you look at the other natural, food system, sustainability development, political, there's opportunities for strong community development. How do we build that capacity? And then under social, cross community buy-in was a word that popped up a lot. And then this is actually my favorite quote, and I'm going to read this one because I really like the way this person presented it as actually kind of a plan. Communities need to understand resilience, how they can survive and thrive. Then they need to explore initiatives which have worked for communities similar to theirs. Finally, many communities need an outside spark for progress to flame up. Often this is a facilitator who comes in to fan the flames of local entrepreneurship. I want that person in my community because I want them to have that fire. They themselves have that fire. So that's who I want in my community. I wanted to share that because that was my favorite um, quote there. And then finally, talking about this next steps. We do have a report coming soon. It is actually, we are in the process of doing the final edits on this. Like I said earlier, we're still listening. This could be considered part of a listening session. But how can we take this information that we've learned and use it for issues such as heirs property or land tenure issues? The problems of food deserts, food insecurity. How do we bring prosperity to rural America? And then how do we instill that resilience? And then I know there's other issues that you may see in your communities. Feel free. Let's talk about those. What are some assets, challenges, and opportunities that we might have not mentioned? And uh, you know, I love learning from other folks from other parts of the region because I can take that knowledge that you may have had an experience with and apply it to my own community. So, uh, you know, it's open mic now. Don't ask me a question I know the answer to. Just kidding. But I appreciate you listening. And I guess, Nicole, we are in the process of discussion.
Sounds
Am I right?
wonderful. Thank you. You want to
Thank you.
start with if people have clarifications? Sorry about that. If they have clarifications or other kinds of questions or thoughts and reactions, go forth.
And I have my friend Jason Insminger and Rachel Welburn both. Jason formerly of the Northeast Center and Rachel currently of the Southern Center.
Thanks, Russ. I guess something to throw out, just because this has been on my mind recently when Russ brought up cultural capital and food systems, is thinking about, right, cultural foodways as adding a DEI lens, right? How we lift up different communities, groups within our communities, populations that through cultural foodways that can create not only entrepreneurial opportunity for them, but the ability to preserve and honor their own cultures. Here in Maine, we are talking about this in relation to our Native and Indigenous populations and how we support Native and Indigenous cultural foodways and create opportunities for economic, social, and cultural resilience on tribal lands. So just throwing that out as, one way that we can sort of think of integrating all of these different social capitals into our various work in ag and food systems.
Mm-hmm. And I see Stephen has raised his hand.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if maybe you'll get to this later, but I'm really curious, how did you measure the different capitals, right? Did you use just a standard instrument that's out there, or did you do something different?
I'm going to let Jason answer that
I was
question.
like, Russ, you want to take that one?
Yeah.
That's actually a great question, and I'd invite Rachel to jump in as well. So on the community capitals work, that's actually qualitative work, Stephen. So what both in the survey, respondents were asked to rank the 8 priorities that Russ had put up in that graphic from Extension Foundation. The many colored graphic. And so they ranked those topics, and then for each of their top 3 topics in terms of, this is the top 3 priority for rural communities. They were provided open-ended responses opportunity to provide open-ended responses on identifying what are the assets, what are the challenges, and what are the opportunities you see within that topic area. So if a respondent said agriculture and food systems is a top 3 priority for my rural community or the rural communities I work with, then later on in the survey, they were asked to tell us more about assets, challenges, and opportunities. And then as a team of researchers, we did a double round of coding to code out responses and identify what elements of the community capitals were present within their response. So each response, could have been that, there were multiple capitals identified. It was just dichotomous. And then we summed up and looked at, okay, what's the proportion of respondents? Those are the figures that Russ provided here that talked about each of those community capitals in their responses.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. So what are some challenges in your communities that might have rung with you? Anyone?
Well, this is Tanya Lema from over in Dare County, North Carolina. So we're heavy tourist area. And many of what the findings that you found are things that we struggle with here, the workforce development, the rural broadband, even though in the more populated areas, we have decent internet, but there's a lot of unincorporated areas that it's, you drive miles and miles without any connection or anything like that. So I think your findings align very well with what issues we are seeing here in Dare County. So it's good to confirm that we're all kind of in the same boat, but, just looking for solutions for things. So
we do have some questions in the chat about sending out the final report, or whether there'll be a report that captures all of this. And it sounds like Rachel said yes. What is the best way for us to be able to keep track of how to access that?
Yeah, and I see Jason's grabbing the link. We do have the preliminary report on a website, so we'll have that for you in just a sec.
Thanks, Rachel. And thanks, Jason.
So Jamie's interested in the actual instrument.
So I'll just come on and say why. We at K-State Research and Extension, Kansas State Research and Extension, we have what are called program focus teams, and our community vitality program focus team has created an action plan. And what action plans are sort of an opportunity for agents to plug into work that has to do with specific program focus areas. One of them right now is the community capitals framework. We've teased it out, and we've created an opportunity for different program areas. Say that you're in family and consumer science, or you're in crop production, and you find I'm doing a program or some specific work that doesn't fit into my program area exactly. How is it that I would be able to measure my work? And so we've created this general, but not general, action plan focused on the community capitals that is very exciting and popular to those in our system. But we have a general tool that has been created. I saw my colleague, Kylie Harrison, worked very hard to create a general tool, but something like this really flips a trigger for me. And the idea that you can, a tool that would be, that we would have the opportunity to look through and model off of, not exactly do the exact same way. Is that, I mean, I understand that you might be kind of guarded with it at this point because you're working with it, but if where are the areas that inspired you that to put that together in the way that you did, that you could point us toward?
Yeah, sorry, I'll go ahead and take that one and ask Rachel and Russ to jump in. So that's actually really interesting, Jamie. I think that first I would say the instrument we have, I don't think there's any reason we wouldn't share it out at this point to specific people who ask. I know at Penn State we closed out the IRB when I left Penn State to come to UMaine into my new role. And so there's that part. I would say I don't know if the methodology that we took in the stakeholder engagement process would fit particularly well with the exact use case that you're identifying. I would actually say this could be a broader conversation with, in part, what's called the CRED team. If you know the CRED, the Community Resource Economic, I can't remember what it stands for right now, right? But the CRED indicators team, you know, that might be adapting those indicators because they are sort of the core community indicators that Extension has identified for community and regional economic development as something to look at. But on the community capitals standpoint, I would actually point to my colleagues at the SRDC, particularly John, Green, and Rachel, because they have a lot of expertise in using community capitals framework and sort of, is there a scale? You know, we didn't use a scale in this work. That wasn't the purpose here. We were trying to do stakeholder engagement, which is very different than impact measurement, right? Sort of a different activity. I did put in, oh, thanks, Michael is here. I forgot Michael was here. Michael is on, I think, Michael, you're on the CRED team, right? And so, the link that I put in the chat is sort of our broad link for the listening sessions overall. And that's where you can access the preliminary report that we had, which will answer a little bit more about the survey methodology, which I know was a question that came up in how the survey was administered. The final report will have a little bit more methodology on the secondary phase of the listening sessions, which were the actual listening sessions themselves. Right, so that component of the iterative process. I would just finally note, because I just had this conversation today with a colleague of mine here in the School of Marine Sciences at UMaine, on how we use sort of video stories and narratives from stakeholders as a means of qualitatively evaluating impact, which I think for those of us in community and regional economic development is really important, because a lot of the impacts we have are not always tangible in the short term, but people can extrapolate based on the experiences they have to what those may be in the near term, in the longer term future for their communities. And so I think that in that case, using something like the community capitals framework, and even the kinds of questions we asked in the survey, but in some sort of qualitative way of like, what are the assets that have been created through a program? What are the challenges that a community still faces? What new opportunities have been opened up based on an intervention? And then coding those after the fact into the community capitals could actually be a way to do impact assessment through storytelling and qualitative story collection.
Thank you, Jason. I was going to say that I just recently got on the CRED team, so I'm very excited to know that I'm in a good direction. What we're kind of doing is trying to find all the different areas, because when we first started out, we were doing kind of research on it. How is it being utilized? And so anytime this comes up, it's exciting. So thank you very much.
Can I jump off of that? Because I actually have another question about that. And this would be a question to Rachel or to anybody else who uses ripple effect mapping, which, as we're speaking of sort of story-based evaluation tools, is one of my favorite, obviously one of my very favorites. But I'm wondering about, for those who've used ripple effect mapping, if you've asked a broader set of questions other than, so this tool usually starts with appreciative inquiry questions, right? So they're framed in terms of what have been the high points of this intervention. But this is kind of expanding beyond that. And then there's oftentimes, I know practitioners then sort of end with, well, what are some of the challenges that may or may not have come up, et cetera. But it's not nearly as systematic with respect to kind of assets, opportunities, and strengths, like as you've just talked about. So I was wondering, Rachel or anybody else, if you have seen REM used in some different ways where it doesn't lose the strength of the appreciative inquiry start, but that expands a little bit beyond them.
So we did an impact study of a project several years ago, Turning Tide on Poverty. And for those of you that live in the Northwest, you had horizons, and we were mirroring after horizons. So if either of those ring a bell, then that was the project. It was a dialogue process, so very much an engagement piece. And so we were thinking, how do we best do the impact? So we chose to do ripple mapping, but we coded the map across the capitals. So I might be able to find a picture real quickly. But if you can imagine, if you know how to do ripple mapping, we put the 7 community capitals around the edges of the map. And when we coded something, we asked people, we explained what they were, and we said, which of these does it speak to? And we had people that would just say, oh, well, that's human capital, or no, that's social capital. And so we would roughly aim them in the direction of the community capital that was being supported. And so from that, we were able to show how the dialogue work. And we did them exactly alike in all the places that we went, with, in fact, even to the point of having the capitals in the same place on the map, so you could see at a glance what was happening. And so we found, not surprisingly, that the dialogue work around poverty built a lot of social capital. That was you could see the heavy weight on the maps. So that's one way we've done it. I've never done it where you're doing it both ways, where you're doing assets and challenges, but that's an example of how ripple mapping could be brought into this work. It can be used for planning, like if we were going to do this work really well. So if you're thinking about a food system, what are the things we would need to do, and what would they impact? So you could flip it and do it as a planning piece.
I love using ripple effect mapping for planning so much. And I went ahead and threw into the chat. This is a link to the field guide for ripple effect mapping, which is a couple hundred pages. So this is sort of the Bible for if you're interested in this particular type of qualitative evaluation tool. There's 3 different types and methods or ways of doing ripple effect mapping. So this describes the 3 methods, and the most valuable, well, there's lots of valuable parts of this field guide, but it also includes many, many examples on the ground of how you do this with food systems groups and with other groups through cooperative extension or outside of cooperative extension, so that you can get a really good sense, everything down to like what agenda would you use, etc. And my other very favorite story-based evaluation tool is called the Most Significant Changes. I'm going to put this in the chat too. It's called Most Significant Changes methodology. And this is a methodology that was developed during the 1990s, that was developed originally for international development projects, but as opposed to a participatory kind of in real time oral story-based process like ripple effect mapping. Most Significant Changes is a written story-based process that really is a lot about gathering a wide variety of different stakeholder stories, and then this really rigorous, this really in-depth process of how teams of people go about judging which is or is not the most significant and why, and what that can tell you in terms of your organization. But it may or may not be as useful to this group, but I'll put a link in case anyone's curious.
If I could just add into this while we're talking about this, because this is, I think, a really fantastic conversation. For those who maybe aren't as much in the research side, there are now increasingly more and more tools. The R statistics package just came out with a bunch of new AI-based tools to help with coding really large qualitative data sets that is making this kind of qualitative research more and more accessible to sort of everyday users. So just want to sort of put that out there also, to not be afraid of, engaging in this sort of qualitative work, because there are a lot of tools that help make it easier. In Vivo is a little expensive, but that's another one that has a good online interface for multiple coders to be engaged. To be honest, for this work, what we did, and Rachel and Russ can speak to what it looked like on the back end, but we just used Excel documents to do our coding. Right? Each question section had its own tab, and the team that was coding a particular topic area shared those Excel documents and did the coding through using Excel. So it's more accessible than it sometimes seems. I know sometimes the data use issues can, be our evaluation team say, well, just do a survey because it's easier to deal with the data. I do also just want to quickly, while I have the floor for a second, follow up on Rebecca. I think it was you that someone asked, when will the report be available? How do you access it? What's the best way for this group to access it? So we just received back our external review panel comments. We are going to be meeting as a research team to think about and reflect upon what our external reviewers said for our final report. So I don't want to say too much what a timeline might be, other than it will probably be December or January that the final report would come out, unless Russ and Rachel go screaming from the room thinking about that timeline. But I know we all also want to get this work out because it's really good work, and I think we're all very proud of. And so that's our process. I would say if you are not on your region's RRDC email list, please go join it now so that you receive their regional announcements for everything, including accessing the final report when that is made public.
So just popping this up here real quickly, this is the one I was talking about. You could see how the weighted, there's something that went to each capital, but for this particular project, the human and social, just heavily weighted, and that mirrored across all the different projects. And then the capitals around the edges. So.
Rachel, that was the first time I saw that, and my little brain immediately goes to, man, we could do network analysis with that.
Well, do we have any final questions or comments?
I will put for our South people, and you don't have to be in the South to join our e-newsletter. It's around the South. It's monthly. I'll put it in chat. Anyone can join. We'd be glad to have you, but it is what we use. So, and there's a place, if you go to that link over on the kind of on the right side at the top, you'll see a place to subscribe.
Awesome. Russ, do you or Nicole, does anyone have any final kind of wrap up before we actually have time for Jamie, who's been back to back all day in webinars, to go to the bathroom, everyone, which is a blessing. And thank you for that gift of time to drink some water. Any final closing thoughts?
I just thank you for having me today.
We appreciate you so much. And this was really, really helpful and valuable. And Nicole, do you have anything?
No, thanks. Good job, Russ. And
Thank you.
really great resources here. We appreciate it.
And stay safe, Florida folks.
Yes,
Yeah.
and North Carolina too.
Yeah.
And on up the coast. All right.
Bye.